Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. Today, I want to talk to you guys about the lymphatic system. It is one of the major systems in the body that is actually part of your immune system, but it is under-discussed, I think. So we are going to explore that a bit today. The role of your lymphatic system is to help out with your immune system, to maintain the balance of fluids in your body, and to also absorb some fats and fat-soluble nutrients. So it's made up of an extensive network of vessels that go through almost all of the tissues in your body to help promote the movement of a fluid that is referred to as lymph. And lymph goes through your body in a manner that's very similar to the way that blood flows. Lymph in and of itself is a colorless fluid, and it has white blood cells in it. It goes over a lot of the tissues in your body, and then it captures bacteria, anything that's not supposed to be in your body, and brings it to the lymph nodes in order to destroy it. So it's kind of like recycling or a garbage facility, more or less, for your body. It's a waste disposal system. It is going to take it back to the place from which it came and go ahead and get rid of it, to neutralize it and make sure that your body is running as optimally as it can. So this lymphatic system and these lymph nodes are really important for taking care of your body. You have about 600 lymph nodes in your body. And you may be familiar with lymph nodes if you've ever been to the doctor and they've palpated around your neck when you have had a sore throat. And they're checking to see if there's any swelling, because since the lymphatic system really brings that bacteria back into the nodes in order to be destroyed, you will get them swelling sometimes in response to infections because it has bacteria, other organisms in there, so viral cells, etc., as well as a buildup of lymph fluid and the immune system cells working to dispose of everything in there. So it's kind of jam-packed in this sort of balloon, perhaps is a good way to think of it. And it is going to get larger or smaller based on whether or not there's an infection in there. So if you have a throat infection, then you may feel like your glands are swollen. So those lymph nodes are swollen. And you can generally feel them under your jaw, in that area where your doctor palpates around your neck, in your armpits, or in the groin area. So some people refer to them as being glands, but they're really your lymph nodes. So if you are having swollen lymph nodes and the swelling is not going away, or if your lymph nodes start getting hard or rubbery and you can't really move them or they're difficult to move, or if you have a fever or any unexplained weight loss or trouble breathing or swallowing, then you should go ahead and see a doctor. In addition to helping you out with your immune system in removing these organisms from different parts of your body and taking them to be disposed of, your lymphatic system also has some special tiny vessels called lacteals, and these are there to help your body absorb fat and fat-soluble nutrients from your gut in your digestive system. So they work with those very tiny blood vessels we've discussed previously called capillaries, and they're in the area of your small intestine where you have kind of a folded surface membrane. Those blood capillaries absorb other nutrients directly into your bloodstream as well. So for the anatomy of it, so we've covered the physiology, very briefly, the function. Now we're going to talk more about the structure, the anatomy of it. So the lymphatic system has lymph vessels, like blood vessels. It has ducts, nodes, and some other tissues. Around 2 liters of fluid leak from the cardiovascular system into your body's tissues each day. And the lymphatic system is a network of vessels that go out and collect that fluid, called lymph. And lymph is a clear fluid that comes from blood plasma. So these lymph vessels form a network throughout your body that branches off dendritically, just like the respiratory system and just like your circulatory system. And it reaches most of the body's tissues. These vessels work with the veins to return fluid from the tissues. So unlike blood, the lymphatic fluid is not pumped by an organ like the heart, but rather it's squeezed through these vessels whenever we use our muscles. And that's one reason why it's very important to get some exercise. Being sedentary is not good for your lymphatic system. But generally, when we think of exercising, we think about doing it to lose weight, typically, maybe for health concerns, or we think about it for wanting to look a certain way or to be stronger for whatever reason, whether it's our job or a sport we're into, or we just want to do it for us. That's totally valid as well. But we don't really think about it in regards to taking care of our lymphatic system because, again, we don't really tend to talk about it. But it's very important for your lymphatic system. The properties of the lymph vessel walls and the valves that are associated with it help control how the lymph moves through your body. Like veins, lymphatic vessels do have valves inside them to stop fluid from flowing back in the wrong direction. But we still need to be up and about and moving around in order to promote the movement of the lymph through the body to help get rid of those fluids that are leaking from the cardiovascular system into our body's tissues each day, and also to make sure that lymph can travel throughout the body and do what it needs to do in order to grab those microorganisms and dispose of them in the lymph nodes. So lymph is drained progressively towards larger vessels until it gets to the 2 main channels, the lymphatic ducts in our trunk or in our thorax or abdomen area. And from there, the filtered lymph fluid returns to the blood in the veins. So in this way, it's kind of working like an inverse respiratory system. So it is starting at the very small areas of the body and carrying everything to the big 2 main lymphatic ducts in our bodies so that that filtered lymph fluid can go back into the blood in the veins. So these vessels branch throughout your body and are coming from these junctions that are referred to as lymph nodes. So these are sometimes referred to as glands, but they're not true glands. So true glands are part of your endocrine system, and these lymph nodes are part of the lymphatic system. So in your lymph nodes, you have immune cells that are kind of doing a TSA check for anything that is not supposed to be there. So it's pulling the bacteria, viruses, fungus, etc. out of your body. And these lymph nodes are not the only lymphatic tissues in your body. Your tonsils, your spleen, and your thymus gland are also lymphatic tissues and important components of your lymphatic system. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk specifically about what these organs do. Stay tuned. You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking to learn more about the latest trends from the fitness world? Are you confused by all the different trends that are out there? The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place for you. The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place to come for people of all skill and interest levels. Join us as we explore the latest trends in the fitness world. Does that new exercise really work? Should I try yoga? Whatever your question, chances are good you'll find an answer on the GSMC Fitness Podcast.
Introducing the lymphatic system, what it does, and what comprises it. So now we're going to talk specifically about what some of these lymphatic tissues, such as the tonsils, the spleen, and the thymus gland do. So first up are your tonsils. They are in the back of your mouth, and if you had strep throat a lot as a kid like I did, or any other type of sore throat like bacterial or viral pharyngitis, then your tonsils may have been the bane of your existence. I should have maybe gotten mine removed, but it doesn't matter at this point. I am not typically coming into contact with that. But you can also get tonsillitis from a lot of different issues. So that is just a swelling of the tonsils. I had tonsillitis a lot as a kid, and it was not fun, you guys. But your tonsils are there to help produce lymphocytes, and that is a type of white blood cell, as well as antibodies. So these are really important, and they might look like they're hanging in a weird area in the back of your throat, but they're there for a good reason. They kind of hang down at a junction between your mouth and your pharynx, and that allows them to protect you against anything that may have been inhaled or swallowed, like bacteria, viruses, and so on. And these are the tissues that are really getting affected by tonsillitis. Since your tonsils are such an important part of your lymphatic system, even if you get a lot of cases of tonsillitis like I did as a kid, that is often not going to result in getting your tonsils removed because you kind of need it. It's getting infected because there's something going on that is causing them to be trapping this material that may be being inhaled or ingested. So in addition to tonsillitis, you can also get tonsil stones. If you're not familiar with tonsil stones, but you love Dr. Pimple Popper, have I got a treat for you. You can go to YouTube and check out some tonsil stone removals, and it can be pretty fascinating. There's some Facebook groups for them as well, but tonsil stones are hard white or yellow formations that are on or within your tonsils. And sometimes they're not entirely hard yet when you find them. It just depends on how soon you're seeing them. They range widely in size, something that could be smaller than a grain of rice to being even as large as a large grape. They are rarely going to be super big, and they're not generally going to cause other health complications, but sometimes they can get larger and cause your tonsils to swell. Now, these tonsil stones are being caused by a buildup of debris in your mouth or in your tonsil area. So that could be dead cells, mucus, saliva, even food that can get trapped in these little pockets that are referred to as tonsil crypts. And so these crypts aren't just small pockets, but they're also like tunnels, little crevices, pits. They have a bunch of different shapes, but they're all part of the tonsil crypts. So when things that get stuck in there, then bacteria and fungi feed on that buildup, and that is what is causing a problem. So some folks have only one tonsil stone, and others may have a bunch of them in smaller formations, just depending on where that debris ends up in those tunnels and pits and crevices known as the tonsil crypts. And if you have them in there over time, then the debris is going to get harder and harder, and it can turn into a tonsil stone. There are a couple of different things that can cause that, including having large tonsils or chronic issues like sinus issues or tonsillitis a lot. You can also get them from poor dental hygiene. So if you are perhaps coughing up something that is in a weird little chunk, or you look at the back of your mouth and it looks like there's something white or yellow that's stuck in there, it may well be a tonsil stone. And if you are into Dr. Pimple Popper and you want to learn more about tonsil stones, I highly recommend Googling it. I really enjoy watching people get those things removed from their bodies, whether it's earwax or pimples or tonsil stones. Gallstones are pretty fascinating too, as well as botfly removals. So if you are wanting to expand beyond Dr. Pimple Popper because you've already seen everything that you think there is to see on the internet regarding pimples, then go ahead and check out some of those other videos. Now I want to talk to you guys about the spleen. So your spleen is also part of your lymphatic system. It's not connected to it in the same way that lymph nodes are, but it is a lymphoid tissue. So that means that it is playing a role in producing white blood cells that are part of the immune system. So it is not a tissue that is specifically lymphatic, but it is lymphoid. So it is associated with the lymph tissue. So its other major job is to filter your blood to help remove some of those microbes like bacteria, viruses, fungi, as well as old and damaged red blood cells and platelets. The spleen is kind of an underappreciated organ. We tend to know mostly about what our liver does and our kidneys, our heart, and our lungs, but our spleen and our gallbladder, I think, are very underappreciated. So we're going to learn more about those as we do more of these podcasts. In addition to your spleen and your tonsils, the thymus gland is also really important for your lymphatic system. It's a lymphatic organ and an endocrine gland. So it is both, and it is found just behind your sternum, your breastbone. It is going to secrete hormones for you, and it is really important in producing, maturing, and differentiating immune T cells. So differentiation means it's turning it into different types. It's really active in developing your immune system, and it happens in utero, so before birth, and throughout childhood. Your bone marrow in and of itself is not lymphatic tissue, but it is considered to be part of the lymphatic system because it's where those B cell lymphocytes that are part of your immune system really mature. During pregnancy, the liver of a fetus is regarded as part of the lymphatic system because it's really important in the development of lymphocytes, so for those lymph cells. And that's really important for fighting off infections as well. So you have a whole lot going on in this lymphatic system. If you've ever seen a diagram of it in an anatomy book or a biology book, then you may remember it as being the one that is in green. So you can also go online and find 3D models of the lymphatic system, and they are interactive in nature, so you can turn them around and click on them. There are also some really great anatomy and physiology apps you can get on your phone for free or pretty cheap if you'd like to explore this more for yourself or with your kids. We can turn this podcast into an exercise in learning at home as we are all social distancing right now. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how the lymphatic system fights infections within your immune system. Stay tuned.
I want to talk to you guys about this amazing product I've been using lately called Hydrant. If you're like me and you want to kick the coffee habit, but you're worried about your energy levels depleting, to avoid the morning sluggishness and that midday slump, you need to make sure you're hydrated. It's super important. And that's where I've been using Hydrant. And for 25% off your first order, you can go to drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC at checkout. Hydrant is basically flavored electrolyte packets you mix directly into your water to make hydrating your body easy and delicious. And what I love about Hydrant, it's backed by research. The formula was developed by Oxford scientists to provide perfectly balanced, efficient hydration. Again, that's drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC for 25% off your first order. Another really cool thing about Hydrant, there's no synthetic colors or artificial sweeteners. The formula is vegan and you can choose between 3 different flavors or a variety pack. So for all my vegan friendly fellows out there, this one's for you. Again, this is drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the organs and tissues that make up our lymphatic system, including the thymus gland and the spleen and our tonsils and other associated tissues like bone marrow and the liver in a fetus. So now we're going to talk specifically about the lymphatic system in context of how it operates with the immune system to defend your body against any unwanted microorganisms that really should not be there. So your lymphatic system is very important in keeping us from dying from infections. So our bodies are really constantly exposed to types of microorganisms that could cause an infection and kill us. As we've discussed in our episode about skin, your epidermis is showing, the skin is really your first line of defense and is a physical barrier. So it is just making sure that nothing can slip into the skin. So for the most part, most types of hazardous microorganisms we can come in contact with are generally spread through being inhaled, or they're bloodborne, or they're transmitted through bodily fluids. Most of them cannot just get through your skin because that's part of your skin's job. Also, you have toxic barriers in your body, like your stomach contents. It's a very acidic environment in there, and that is also to help kill any microorganisms that you may have ingested. You also have that good bacteria throughout your body, that natural friendly bacteria that does things like keep other organisms, such as Candida, in check and at reasonable levels in your body. So in that way, you have good bacteria too, and they are essentially fighting fire with fire. Now, sometimes though, pathogens do get into our bodies despite all of these other barriers that we have in place. And when that happens, the lymphatic system helps enable our immune system to respond appropriately. They are a tag team. So if the immune system can't just fight off the microorganisms, it can be really dangerous for our health and in some cases even be fatal. So there are numerous immune cells and special molecules that work in tandem to fight off these pathogens. So how does the lymphatic system fight infections in this case? I'm going to tell you. So the lymphatic system produces white blood cells. Those are called lymphocytes. And there are two types of them, T cells and B cells. And both the T cell and B cell lymphocytes travel through your lymphatic system. When they reach the lymph nodes, they get filtered and they are activated by coming into contact with any foreign particles like viruses or bacteria, etc., that are in your lymph fluid. And from then on, the pathogens or invaders are referred to as antigens. When those lymphocytes become activated by coming into contact with these antigens, they form antibodies and they start to produce defenses for your body. They can also produce antibodies just from memory if they've already encountered that specific pathogen in the past. And that is partly how it helps you to fight off something that you have had before. And that's kind of how vaccines work. Vaccines work by introducing some of these less dangerous cells into our bodies so that these white blood cell types, the T cells and the B cells, can go ahead and recognize that pathogen within the body. And that way, if we ever come up against it in our day-to-day lives, our body can go ahead and recognize it and fight it off. It's very effective for the most part, and it works as long as those are pathogens that we are encountering in our day-to-day environment. But that's also why if we go to a different country and we drink the water in a place where the people who live there are totally fine, and so we're doing what they're doing, but it makes us sick, it's because that is endemic to their area. That's what's naturally there for them, and so they're used to those pathogens, whereas we are not. This is something our body has never come up against before, And so our body is just like, whoa, buddy, hold up. I'm not feeling so good, Mr. Stark. So it's something that is important to keep in mind, that it's in your natural environment. And if you're going outside of your natural environment, then you are going to perhaps need to get more shots before you go overseas. And I'm sure if you've traveled abroad, you may be familiar with that as well, depending on where you've gone. So these memory cells are really important for fighting off infections and for recognizing these infections. So they can produce those antibodies from memory if they've already found that pathogen before. And that can give you a leg up on your immune response. You have these collections of lymph nodes in your neck, arms, and groin. And we can be aware of them when we get swollen lymph nodes in response to an illness. So in the lymph nodes is where the lymphocytes first come into contact with these pathogens, and then they communicate with each other and start that defense response. Activated lymphocytes then go further up the lymphatic system so they can reach the bloodstream. And it's there that they're equipped to spread that immune response throughout the whole body through the blood circulation. So your circulatory system is working in tandem with your lymphatic system to boost your immune system. And this lymphatic system and the way that the lymphocytes operate form what immunologists call the adaptive immune response, because these cells adapt to these new types of invaders in your body and proceed accordingly. And if they've encountered it before, then they have adapted and learned from these previous encounters in order to do a better job this time. So your cells are learning from previous encounters, and your body has trillions of these lymphocytes, these lymphatic cells. And they're very specific cells, and they can be really long-lasting in their response to particular pathogens. Now, if your lymphatic system does not continue working properly, like if something happens with your nodes, the ducts, the vessels, or your lymph tissues getting blocked, or infected, or cancerous, or inflamed, then you can end up with a sort of disease. So lymphoma is one of the big ones, and one that is probably more recognizable to most folks. It's a cancer that starts out in your lymphatic system, and it is the most serious lymphatic disease. You've likely heard of Hodgkin's lymphoma, especially if you watch Dr. House, and you have seen that these can affect a specific type of white blood cell that is referred to as Reed-Sternberg cells. But then you also have non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and that is the type of lymphoma that does not involve the Reed-Sternberg cells. Cancer that is affecting your lymphatic system is generally a secondary cancer. That means you probably initially had a different primary tumor, like breast cancer, or you may have had skin cancer, etc., and then it has transferred to a nearby or regional lymph node as your body has been trying to fight it off, and then it's resulted in a lymphoma. Although your lymph nodes are meant to gather these particles for disposal, sometimes your lymph nodes can swell because it can become infected in and of itself. So your lymph node can fill with pus and then create an abscess. When that happens, sometimes the skin over top of the nodes might look kind of red or streaky. And localized lymphadenitis, which is what it's called when these lymph nodes become infected and start swelling a bit, can affect the nodes near the infection. So like if you have tonsillitis, then it's most likely going to be localized lymphadenitis where it's near that infection in your throat, right beneath your jaw area. When you have generalized lymphadenitis, that occurs when a disease has spread through your bloodstream and affects your entire body. And that cause can be sepsis or an upper respiratory tract infection to anything in between. It's widely variable. All right, we are going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dive deep into how the lymphatic system specifically defends against infection. Stay tuned. You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Before the break, we were talking about the lymphatic system and how these different units make it up. Now we are going to talk more in depth about how this works in your immune system. So this lymph is really formed from the fluid that is seeping through the walls of the capillaries and into your body's tissues. And as we mentioned before, there's about 2 liters of it that does so each day. But it's not just a fluid. It also contains oxygen, proteins, and other nutrients that are really nourishing the tissues. So when we say leak, we don't necessarily mean it's a hole in a boat that needs to be stopped, more or less. These tissues do need to be bathed in this nutrient bath, more or less. And then the lymphatic system is just collecting the excess and recycling it, more or less. So some of that fluid re-enters the capillaries, and some of it just enters the lymphatic vessels where it becomes lymph. And those small vessels connect to the larger ones in that dendritic way we discussed, and eventually form the thoracic duct, which is your largest lymphatic vessel. And that joins with the subclavian vein, and subclavian means it's below your clavicles, below your collarbone, and returns lymph to the bloodstream. So your lymph is transporting these foreign substances like bacteria, but also including cancer cells, or even just dead or damaged cells that are present throughout your body in these tissues, back to your lymphatic vessels and your lymph organs to dispose of them. And your lymph is going to contain a lot of white blood cells. All the substances that are transported by the lymph throughout your body pass through at least one lymph node, one of those junctions we discussed. And that's where the foreign substances can be filtered out and destroyed before we move that fluid back into the bloodstream by putting it back into that vein. So in your lymph nodes, these white blood cells can collect and they can interact with each other, and they can interact with these antigens to generate your antibodies in that adaptive immune response. And your lymph nodes contain a mesh of tissue that's super crammed, jam-packed tight with B cells, T cells, also macrophages, and something called dendritic cells. So these macrophages are formed from a type of white blood cell referred to as a monocyte. So remember earlier we discussed these T and B cells. Those are lymphocytes, a subcategory of white blood cells, but we also have monocytes and some other types. But these monocytes in particular become macrophages when they move from the bloodstream to the tissue. So very similar in manner to how these pathogens change in name to antigens when they are moved into the lymph nodes. So these monocytes, these macrophages, move into your tissues when the infection occurs. And then over about 8 hours' time, they greatly enlarge and produce little granules within themselves. And that is what distinguishes them as becoming macrophages. These granules are really chock full of enzymes and other types of substances that can help kill and digest these foreign microorganisms that just really should not be there. Those macrophages then stay in your tissues and they are eating. So if you are familiar with Star Trek Voyager, then you may be familiar with the illness they had in that show that was fictional called the phage. And phage means to eat, more or less. So it's a big eating cell. So in this case, the macrophages are ingesting, they're eating these bacteria, damaged and dead cells, any other types of foreign cells or microorganisms. And that process of your macrophages eating a microorganism or another cell or cell fragments like pieces of dead red blood cells is referred to as phagocytosis. And cells that ingest things are termed phagocytes in general. So these macrophages secrete some substances as well that attract other white blood cells to the site of the infection. So they are establishing a chemical marker that is really throwing a flag up in the air, sending up a flare and going, hey guys, I need you to come here. I found something. It's really important. And in that way, it calls everyone over to the site of your infection. They also help out your T cells to recognize invaders and are therefore really important for your acquired immunity. So they act kind of like ants in a way by kind of leaving this chemical substance that is telling the other ants, hey, I found something. But instead of it being food, it is an enemy. Dendritic cells, on the other hand, live in your skin, your lymph nodes, and tissues all throughout your body. Most of these are antigen-presenting cells, and that means that they ingest, process, and present antigens. So that helps your helper T cells to recognize that antigen, that pathogen, when it sees it. And then these dendritic cells present antigen fragments to your T cells within the lymph nodes. Now there's another type of dendritic cell referred to as the follicular dendritic cell, and that is also present in lymph nodes, and it presents intact antigens, so not fragments, just whole ones, that have been linked with antibodies or antibody antigen complexes to B cells. So these follicular dendritic cells help your B cells respond to an antigen. And after these T and B cells are presented with the antigen, then they become activated. So these dendritic cells are really coming up to these T cells and these B cells and going, hey, look what I found. I kind of ate this thing and I processed it and now I want to show it to you. Almost like when your cat kills a bird or a mole or something. And it's like, hey, look what I did. I found this thing. And you're like, oh crap, now I have like a mole infestation. So that is what these dendritic cells are doing for you. They're also really messengers between the innate and your adaptive immune systems. So they're really important, but relatively undiscussed, at least in regular layperson circles. Unless you're an immunologist, we're not really talking about these very much. Let's be honest. So all of these substances are transported by the lymph and pass through at least one lymph node where you have this mesh of tissues that's packed with these B cells, these T cells, and these dendritic cells and macrophages, with the latter two kind of eating these other cells and then going, hey, look what I found, or hey, here's an invader, come and eat this thing. And then the B cells and T cells are like, oh, I recognize you. And they start producing antibodies and sometimes also memorize the type of antigen or pathogen that they're coming in contact with so that they can fight it better and more quickly in the future. So harmful microorganisms that get filtered through that mesh of tissue that has those types of cells are then identified and attacked by those B and T cells. And your lymph nodes are generally clustered in areas where your lymphatic vessels are branching off, like in your neck, your armpits, and your groin. So if you go online and you see where these pictures of your lymphatic system are showing the little clusters of the dots, those are generally going to be representing your lymph nodes. And so these are kind of junction points, like with old train stations and stuff, where it's like, okay, this is where we're going to put this train station juncture because at this point it's going to branch off and you can take a train going north or south or west or wherever. So that is what's going on there. Anywhere that these are really branching off, it's having these nodes, at least at the larger levels, because your lymphatic system works from the smallest vessels to the largest ones, instead of going from the largest to the smallest, like how your respiratory system mostly works, as we discussed last time, although the respiratory system truly works both ways. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the lymphatic system as it relates to the brain and the immune system. Stay tuned.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Taking an in-depth dive into how the immune system functions with the lymphatic system. So now we're going to talk specifically how this works with the brain. So for the longest time, scientists thought that the brain was not associated with the lymphatic system at all. It was really considered to be kind of a no-fly zone in that regard. And your brain is sometimes referred to as being an expensive organ. It only takes up about 2% of your body mass, but it uses about 20% of your body's total energy stores in order to optimally work. So while that high energy demand is what really is helping us to sense and perceive our world, communicate, and remember how to do things like make a sandwich or get to work each morning, there is actually a cost to that. So when your brain cells, which are neurons, when they consume a lot of energy, then they also spit out a lot of debris that tends to float around the brain and can prevent it from functioning normally. I'm not referencing pseudoscience to you guys right now. This is actually from Harvard Health and actual scientific researchers within the lymphatic studies community. So when this happens in your brain and there's debris there, that makes sense, right? Everything is naturally trending towards entropy and chaos. Remember in our episode about the importance of not putting bleach in our bodies, we talked about how after a while, when you put bleach in a container, it's going to degrade into the sodium components, the salt components, and water, because that sodium hypochlorite is breaking down into constituent parts that hold together more easily than these complex molecules do. And that's kind of what's happening here. It's also very similar in regards to how your body works with your respiratory system, as we discussed last week, in how it's going to go ahead and bring you oxygen, and then it's going to get rid of that carbon dioxide that it makes as a byproduct. There's waste all throughout our body in all of its different systems and many different forms. When we think about body waste, we normally think about like waste treatment centers, so defecation and urination. But really, a lot of the systems in your body create waste, and they get rid of it in different ways, whether that is through recycling or if it is through going back into the circulatory system to pick up more oxygen and carry it to the rest of your body and carrying more nutrients, or expelling it from your lungs in gas exchange. There are numerous ways that your body can go about it. And so your brain is really no different. It is using energy, and then it is getting rid of these waste products, this debris that floats around and can really mess with normal brain functioning. And that debris, in the case of the brain, is mostly leftover proteins. But if you leave them alone and they don't get removed, then they can form clumps that are really toxic to your brain. So there's a specific type of it called amyloid beta, and this clumping of that protein has been linked to decreases in cognition, memory, and overall brain function, particularly in people who are living with Alzheimer's disease. So in most organs of your body, your lymphatic system is your primary waste disposal factory to really clear out all of that debris that can cause you a lot of health problems. And that system is going through there and producing that lymph fluid. And lymph is flowing through each organ, cleaning up that debris and washing it into your ducts through your lymph nodes where they are filtered, and keep pushing it through those junctions of the lymph nodes until it drains back into your blood vessels, generally in that subclavian vein. And once it's in the blood, that debris travels onto your kidneys and your liver, where it's further processed, and then it gets eliminated from the body, generally by excreting it through urine and so on. So it really makes sense that your brain would also have a waste disposal system, or we would all just end up with way too much amyloid beta and other types of clumps of proteins, and perhaps die at a much younger age than a lot of us tend to nowadays. So for decades, scientists were not able to find anything like the lymphatic system acting in the brain. And some people started wondering whether the brain possesses an alternative way to get rid of this waste. And with that curiosity comes scientific answers. So a few years back, in around 2017, a researcher named Nedergaard and their colleagues found that cerebrospinal fluid, so that fluid that's around your brain, your cerebro, and spine, your spine, serves as a cushion in your skull, and it also acts like the lymphatic system of the brain. It's like the lymph fluid of the brain. So they did some imaging experiments in mouse brains and visualized the cerebrospinal fluid entering and flowing throughout the brain and then draining into the same ducts that the lymphatic system uses in the rest of the body. So this cerebrospinal fluid also took amyloid beta, that really harmful protein that sometimes clusters in the brain, out with all the other debris and cleared it from the brain. So the researchers in that study were mostly focusing on clearing out amyloid beta. Other leftover proteins were also likely cleared from the brain during this process, though. So they are doing a lot more research on that now. This is kind of a big deal in the scientific community where they're learning a lot more about anatomy right now. And it's similar in a way to our discussion about the interstitium and how they used to go ahead and cut through it and fix it to a slide. And the process of fixing it to a slide ended up draining that fluid. So they didn't know that the interstitium was filled with a fluid. But now we have more ways in the scientific community and in medicine in particular to view these types of issues, and that is allowing us to learn so much more about it, much like the imaging and looking at the cerebrospinal fluid in mice. So Nedergaard's initial work is very exciting, and it's described key details about how cerebrospinal fluid flows throughout the brain. That fluid surrounding the brain flows into ring-shaped spaces that encircle blood vessels within your brain. And those spaces are like portals. I don't know if you guys have ever played the video game Portal or are just, into portals from sci-fi or fantasy, but I love this visualization of it. And these portals are there to allow entry of cerebral spinal fluid into the rest of your brain. And you have this type of brain cells, which are called glia, and they are the gatekeepers of these portals. So these glia wrap themselves around the blood vessels, and they have cellular mechanics that also take up cerebrospinal fluid from those ring-shaped spaces and impart access to neurons and other types of brain cells. So as this cerebrospinal fluid flows throughout your brain, it's collecting those proteins and other types of debris and taking it to your lymphatic ducts. So it is acting as lymph and clearing your brain of the waste and then just sending it down through the lymphatic ducts like it's a trash chute, more or less. And Nedergaard saw this and referred to the newfound brain waste disposal system as the glymphatic system, which I love. You guys, I love a good pun. I love a good portmanteau. And glymphatic system is just beautiful because it's that combination of glia and lymphatic. It also just reminds me of the term glamping, and I really love it. I think the glymphatic system might be my new favorite system in the body. So this is a really big deal in science, and they have been examining how the glymphatic system works in the rest of your body as well. So we're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some ways that you can help out your lymphatic and glymphatic systems for optimal health and wellness. Stay tuned.
GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast gives you advice on everything from hair to fashion to skincare products. We'll talk about the latest trends in makeup, hairstyles, and anti-aging remedies. And we'll cover all of the newest fashion trends. If you have an interest in or questions about the beauty trends that might work best for you, the Golden State Media Concepts Beauty Tips Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
before the break, we were talking about Nedergaard et al.'s group, who have discovered that the brain really uses cerebrospinal fluid to clean out proteins that could become toxic or harmful to the brain, like those clusters of amyloid beta, as well as other debris, by sweeping through the brain and jettisoning them down the same ducts that the lymphatic system uses to clean out the rest of the body. So because it is doing this in association with these glia, these glial cells, your brain cells, then we are referring to it now, according to Nedergaard, as the glymphatic system. It's quirky, it's fun, I love it. So, now that we know about the glymphatic system and the lymphatic system, we want to know, how do we keep these systems running optimally? It's really obvious for our muscles what we need to do for them, just because we tend to talk about those a lot more. You want them to be stronger, we have to test them out to make them stronger. We have to give them a workout. So how does that work for our lymphatic and glymphatic systems? So first step, it's really important to get a good night's sleep. Remember that your brain may only be about 2% of your body mass, but it uses about 20% of your energy. So it's really important that you have enough energy in order for your brain to use it. So if you don't get enough sleep and you don't have enough energy, then it's going to make your day a lot harder. So that sounds really self-explanatory, but we are saying that that is definitely being backed up with science from a true biological perspective. So if you have a good night's sleep, or you've noticed that your mind seems clearer after a hard workout, it makes a lot of sense, because these cognitive benefits are explained by your glymphatic system. Nedergaard and his fellow researchers have established a connection between behaviors that are associated with healthy lifestyle choices and an increase in glymphatic brain debris clearance. So the first behavior that they looked into was sleep. So they used imaging experiments in mice again, and they found that the glymphatic flow significantly increased when the mice entered sleep. So when you go to sleep, your glymphatic system is able to flow more of that cerebrospinal fluid around and do its cleanup thing and jettison it down into the garbage chute of the lymphatic ducts. So that increase was also correlated with it being 2 times faster in clearing amyloid beta in sleeping mice versus awake mice. So not only is it flowing more, but it's also clearing things out at twice the rate, twice as quickly as it was before. So we've known for a while that sleep is really important for things like memory consolidation, forming memories, and so on. But this new data by Nedergaard et al. Is suggesting that sleep is also critical for clearing harmful debris from your brain. And that also in turn makes it work a lot better for us while we are awake. So they also did a study in 2017 from the Belden Group at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and they supported this idea by showing a link between poor sleep and buildup of biological markers for Alzheimer's disease in humans. Now, before I researched this, it would not have occurred to me that not getting enough sleep could be associated in any way with Alzheimer's disease, but there you have it, and it's really starting to build a body of evidence in doing these validation studies, or even different types of studies that can then be compared in metadata studies, as we have discussed before. So this is really supporting the idea that there may be a strong link between poor sleep and a buildup of biological markers that are associated with Alzheimer's disease. So get your sleep, you guys. It's not just for your brain or for your body. It is for all of you, all that you are, all that you may be. Get some sleep. And remember, sleep researchers recommend between 7 and 9 hours per night. In addition to sleep, Exercise is a very important component in both your glymphatic system and your lymphatic system, especially in regards to how they function. So in general, regular exercise has been shown to promote memory retention, improve your mood, and decrease anxiety in humans. Also, as we've discussed previously, if you're really tired and you're hitting that 2 p.m. slump and you are needing to go back into work and have a bunch of big projects to do, or you're worried about a test that's coming up and you really need to study, but you're kind of tired, sometimes instead of taking a nap, it can be really good for you to go ahead and exercise a bit. I learned that from Mr. Morgan when I was in community college, and it has stuck with me. Low mood? Go work out. Low energy? Go work out. And generally that works pretty well for me. Granted, it's hard to work up the motivation to go and do it, but that's why we cultivate discipline instead of relying on motivation. So getting this regular exercise is really important, and Nedergaard also published another study recently that showed that exercise can positively impact how your glymphatic system functions. So in this study, they had a couple of groups of mice. One group had access to a running wheel, and another group had no access to exercise. And they studied them for 5 weeks, and after the 5 weeks, the mice who were exercising showed more than a 2-fold increase in glymphatic flow compared to the sedentary group. So that makes a lot of sense with your lymphatic system in general, because remember, you have to get up and move around. It's your muscles moving that's helping to squeeze that lymphatic fluid throughout your body, because it's not being pumped like your blood is. It doesn't have an organ like the heart to pump it and help it flow. It's relying literally on you getting up and moving around in order to do so. So we already knew that about the lymphatic system, but it's also important to note that that works for the glymphatic system as well. Because remember, that fluid is cerebrospinal fluid. It's really doing its own thing, but since it's draining into the lymph ducts, that is also very important to be getting up and moving around for your brain. So exercise is not just good for your body, it is good for your brain. It literally helps your cerebrospinal fluid take out the trash. So this data that Nedergaard and the Beldling group have been examining and presenting really support the brain boosting effects of exercise, and it gives us an explanation for it. So this increased glymphatic flow following exercise may really be what your brain needs to clear away debris and function at its best. Nedergaard's group also observed there was a post-exercise increase in glymphatic flow in mice that are still awake. So prior to that study, they only really saw increases in mice that were asleep or anesthetized, effectively also asleep. And this observation now suggests that exercise and sleep are independent and equally powerful drivers of brain waste disposal. So this is very important. These both had more than a 2-fold increase. So if you work out and you also go and get enough sleep each night, then you can really maximize the impact of your actions and your habits on getting really good drainage of all the waste in your body. So your brain is our most complex organ, and it makes a lot of sense, you guys, that it has its own unique way to clean out its waste. So it's really cool that making these healthy lifestyle choices, like getting enough sleep or going for a run, can be really great, effective ways to help your brain function better. So in addition to being important for your brain and the glymphatic system, exercise is also the best thing you can do for your lymphatic system. Using your muscles and getting your heart rate up really helps stimulate your lymphatic system and squeeze that fluid through there. They squeeze that lymph through your body and stimulate lymphatic flow. So getting your body to move around via exercise can help your lymphatic system flow more effectively, and that can in turn potentially help prevent infections and other diseases such as cancer. So any type of exercise is helpful for your lymphatic system, according to a doctor at MD Anderson. She says that exercise underwater is especially helpful because the pressure from the water adds an additional component to help you squeeze everything through. Staying at a healthy weight is also going to help your lymphatic system the best. So the exercise is not only helping things move through your body, but it's also keeping your weight down because obesity can damage your lymphatic system. It makes people who are obese more likely to experience problems like lymphedema, where that lymph fluid gets stuck and it can't drain from certain parts of your body. You can also get lymphedema if you have had cancer and the treatments have involved perhaps taking out some of your lymph nodes. I know a few people in my life that has happened to, and it can cause uncontrolled swelling of that lymphatic system due to damage in the lymphatic system. And that is in and of itself what lymphedema is. So there are massages that you can get for that now. And a lot of times with new cancer treatments, you can also get these big blanket almost looking devices that go on parts of your body with Velcro, I believe, and it kind of does a slow manual manipulation of your body, but just with this device. So it's like getting the lymphatic massage, but it is a device that can do it for you at home, even when you are feeling too ill to get out of bed and so on. In addition to that, obesity has also been linked to 12 types of cancer because obesity results in inflammation and hormonal imbalances. So if your lymphatic system is already struggling, obesity can really compound those problems. So these doctors are recommending a healthy lifestyle, including a healthy diet and exercise to prevent obesity, or if you are already obese, to reduce that and get you down to a more healthy range for your BMI, not just for your weight or for your heart or because of associations with diabetes, but also because it's linked to cancer and your lymphatic system is at a disadvantage, which means that your immune system is at a disadvantage because the lymph is not flowing properly. I hope you guys learned a lot with me today and know more about how to take care of this really underloved system, the lymphatic system, and its cousin, the glymphatic system. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Health and Wellness Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.